In the 2240s, a new faction would begin its rise to power in the wastes of the former American Southwest. Spurning the old world values of democracy and rule of law adopted by states like the New California Republic, this new society would rise under a banner influenced by the civilization of ancient Rome, Caesar's Legion. Under the leadership of its ruthless dictator, titling himself Caesar, in emulation of his imperial Roman role models, Caesar's Legion would burst onto the wasteland's geopolitical stage, and, over the course of the next 25 years, carve out an empire for itself in the former states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah through brutal campaigns of conquest, enslavement, and assimilation. Join us in this video as we discuss the history of Caesar's Legion, the story of its eponymous founder, his rise to power, and the Legion's aggressive expansion across the wasteland throughout the mid-23rd century. The story of Caesar's Legion begins with the legend of its founder. The man who would later come to title himself Caesar was born in 2226 near the LA Boneyard in New California, Edward Sallow. Sallow's parents were citizens of the New California Republic, but after his father was murdered by raiders in 2228, his mother sought refuge and safety for them both with the Followers of the Apocalypse. While his mother cooked and cleaned for the followers in their library within the Boneyard, young Edward Sallow gained an education in reading and writing, provided free of charge by the followers. Through his courses, Sallow was taught by the followers that it was their duty, as educated individuals, to help spread knowledge to the downtrodden people of the wasteland. Although Sallow was highly intelligent, he primarily excelled in intellectual pursuits that interested him. Furthermore, the boy's short temper and narcissistic attitude isolated him from his peers. As he grew into adolescence, Sallow gradually became disenchanted with the altruistic goals of the followers, believing that their idealistic mission of enlightenment and the spreading of knowledge to the collective masses of the wasteland was naive, overly optimistic, and constrained by their moral principles, which adhered them to strictly scholarly pursuits. By the time Edward Sallow had reached the age of 20 in 2246, he had become a highly capable anthropologist and experienced linguist. The followers, noting Sallow's linguistic skills and his understanding of tribal cultures and sociology, sent him on his first expedition out of the Boneyard. Although accounts of the expedition's size conflict as to whether it was just 2 men or a 9-man party, Sallow journeyed east toward the Grand Canyon, accompanied by a fellow follower and a physician named Bill Calhoun, having been tasked with studying the culture and dialects of the isolated tribes in that region. It was during their long trek to the Grand Canyon that the expedition chanced upon a large collection of historical books and writings. 2 books in particular caught Sallow's interest: Edward Gibbon's 18th century work, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and Julius Caesar's Commentari de Bello Gallico, or Commentaries on the Gallic War. Captivated by these texts, Sallow engrossed himself in reading and studying them over the next 2 weeks. Their pages inspired the young follower, and although he did not yet know it, these books would play a crucial role in Sallow's future. As they neared the Grand Canyon, their expedition met with a Mormon missionary and tribal specialist named Joshua Graham, who hailed from the settlement of New Canaan in northern Utah. Graham had joined the group to teach Sallow the local languages and customs of the region's tribes. Before reaching their destination, however, the group was ambushed by warriors of the Blackfoot tribe, who captured Sallow, Calhoun, and Graham to be held for ransom. However, according to Joshua Graham, their attack may have been due to a mistranslation, rather than an explicit intent to ransom them. When the captives were brought back to the Blackfoot tribe's village, Sallow noticed their people appeared to be in a weak and pitiful state. In fact, the Blackfoot's insignificance in the region had led them to conflict with 7 other neighboring tribes who wished to conquer them. Poorly equipped and lacking the manpower to defend themselves, Sallow knew it was only a matter of time before one of the other tribes crushed the Blackfoot, destroyed their village, and slaughtered them all, a fate he did not wish to share with his captors. With his intellectual knowledge in weapons and tactics, Sallow decided to take it upon himself to educate the Blackfoot on the proper use of their firearms, how to maintain them, reload magazines, and shoot targets accurately. All the while, Sallow ignored the objections of Calhoun, who wished to adhere to the followers' doctrines of sharing peaceful knowledge, such as science and agriculture. Through all he had learned in his readings at the Boneyard Library, Sallow trained the Blackfoot warriors in the art of war, drilling them in small unit tactics and teaching them how to handle explosives. Impressed by Sallow's knowledge, the Blackfoot appointed him their acting war chief, and when they were finally ready, Sallow led their warriors into action against the Ridges, their weakest foes. When the Ridges refused to capitulate after their village was captured, Sallow ordered that every man, woman and child in the tribe be killed, without mercy or exception. From there, Sallow would continue leading the Blackfoot in a campaign of divide et impera, divide and conquer. Like the early Roman warriors, led by their legendary king Romulus, Sallow led the Blackfoot in their conquests of the neighboring tribes. When the surrounding warriors of the Kaibeb tribe refused to surrender, Sallow brought their envoy to the smouldering ruins of the Ridges settlement. The sight of the villagers' charred corpses piled atop one another stunned the other tribesmen, who were used to conducting petty warfare-style raids, counter-raids, and pillaging. Sallow introduced the tribes of the Grand Canyon to the horrible reality of total warfare, and its destructive, barbaric nature. It was the beginning of the terrifying, brutal tactics that Caesar's legion would become infamous for across the wasteland. Not wishing to be destroyed like the Ridges, the Kaibabs immediately surrendered to Sallow and the Blackfoot. The Fredonian tribe soon followed suit, and before long, all of the tribes of the Grand Canyon had been subjugated by the Blackfoot. Having gained the complete respect and admiration of the Blackfoot, Edward Sallow became their new leader, but he was dissatisfied by the mere prospect of being just another tribal chieftain in the wasteland. Inspired by his rigorous studies of ancient Rome, Sallow perceived that the core issue plaguing the region with endemic tribal warfare was in fact the tribes themselves. Cultural, linguistic, and tribal identities had fragmented the peoples of the Grand Canyon, leading to the constant state of petty warfare that kept them trapped in their primitive state, unable to recover into any sort of stable society. Like the Romans of the ancient world, Sallow would erase all semblances of tribal identities and allegiances, replacing them with a single, united society. In 2247, once his confederation had become large enough, Edward Sallow crowned himself Caesar, leader of the great tribe, which would henceforth be known as Caesar's Legion. In the years to come, the Legion's red banner and its golden bull would become a familiar symbol across the wasteland, striking terror into the hearts of Caesar's enemies and instilling a sense of awe in his followers. Caesar deliberately modeled his legion after the Roman Empire, emulating their imperialistic, totalitarian society, which would grow through the conquest, enslavement, and assimilation of any tribes they encountered during their slow, methodical expansion across the wastelands of the American Southwest. One reason Caesar modeled his state after the Roman Empire was that its European civilization seemed alien and wholly unfamiliar to the tribes he was subjugating. As such, the ignorant and often illiterate tribesmen his armies conquered would be unable to distinguish the legion from the ancient Roman civilization he was merely imitating. His people would speak with a Latin-imbued dialect, pronouncing Latin words in the way of their Roman role models, with the title Caesar, for example, being pronounced as Kaiser. Caesar firmly believed that the Roman Empire's highly militarized autocracy and its ability to integrate and assimilate conquered peoples into its society served as the perfect template for the harsh environment and realities of the post-war wasteland. Caesar held to the philosophy of Hegelian dialectics, that the conflict of thesis and antithesis would ultimately create a synthesis for his empire. In other words, the legion would destroy the negative elements of a conquered society or tribe while integrating its positive attributes into his own state, with the result being a stronger, homogeneous legion. Like Augustus, Caesar sought to establish a Pax Romana across the wasteland, enforcing peace and building a stable society capable of surviving, prospering, and even thriving in the post-apocalyptic world. With the foundations of the legion established, Caesar sent Bill Calhoun back west to the NCR to serve as his messenger, warning the Republic not to interfere with the legion's plans. Caesar viewed the New California Republic as a polity similar to the late Roman Republic, an inefficient bureaucratic state with a government that had become filled with corrupt politicians, kept in the pockets of the NCR's wealthy Brahmin barons and caravan companies, and who ignored the plight of the common citizens they claimed to represent. He knew that the NCR's first two presidents, Aradesh and Tandy, had both effectively served life terms in their office, and despite being always re-elected to the position, Caesar couldn't help but note the irony that when President Tandy died in 2248, and the NCR had to actually begin practicing democratic elective terms for their presidents, the wheels of democracy began to slow the Republic's efficiency. It appeared to Caesar that the NCR in its current state was doomed to share the fate of the Roman Republic. While Calhoun departed for New California, the remaining members of his original expedition were murdered on Caesar's orders, all save for Joshua Graham, who swore his allegiance to Caesar and would become his senior lieutenant in the legion. Graham was appointed the legion's first legatus, becoming known as the Malpais Legate, and he would lead Caesar's forces in their conquests during the next 30 years. Over 3 decades, Graham campaigned across the American Southwest, completely bringing the former states of Arizona and New Mexico under the Legion's control, while also adding lands from Utah and Colorado into the burgeoning empire. Tribes were forcefully assimilated into the Legion, and cities and their inhabitants became subjects under the rule of Caesar. By the year 2250, Caesar had proclaimed himself as the Son of Mars, and 5 years later, he established the Legion's new capital in the ruins of Flagstaff, Arizona. The ranks of the Legion's army are primarily filled with physically fit slaves deemed worthy of serving Caesar, as well as boys taken from conquered tribes who are raised into military service. Women are forbidden to serve in the army, with the Legion's misogynistic ideology restricting their role in society to birthing more male slaves, viewing them as nothing but the property of their legionary masters. The legionnaires are indoctrinated into a militaristic lifestyle that maintains absolute obedience and unwavering loyalty to Caesar and the ideology of the Legion. Training for service in the Legion's armies is brutal, with only the most physically fit and able-bodied men surviving the harsh regimen, which filters out the strong from the weak. Once a legionary has completed his training, he will remain in the army for life, with death providing his only exit from military service. Most of Caesar's legionnaires are trained to utilize low-tech or improvised weapons, primarily melee weapons, such as machetes and hand-thrown javelins, emulating the fierce martial prowess of ancient Roman soldiers. However, some firearms are still permitted in certain tactical circumstances where they may prove necessary. Standard legionary armor is mostly composed of pre-war athletic gear and sports equipment, as well as headgear such as football and umpire helmets, all reinforced with metal and leather padding to provide the troops with makeshift imitations of Roman legionary armor. Due to a ban on modern medicine, synthetic chems, and alcohol within the Legion, wound treatment is primarily restricted to medicinal herbs, healing powder, bitter drinks, antivenom, and a limb-healing agent known as Hydra. The rank structure in the Legion's hierarchy begins with the recruit legionnaires, who are the lowest ranking and least experienced soldiers in the army. In battle, the recruits form the army's first line of battle. Next up are the prime legionaries, soldiers who have been tested in combat, and form the second battle line behind the recruits. Veteran legionnaires are the best equipped and most experienced of the Legion's standard army ranks, typically held in a reserve line and committed into action once the enemy has been completely exhausted, battling the first 2 waves. The army's junior officer rank is Legionary Decanus, soldiers who have demonstrated leadership potential in battle and hold the authority to administer small unit tent encampments. The army's senior officer rank is the Centurion, field commanders in major operations, who are appointed to their roles after years of dedicated service and who possess immense battle experience. Above the Centurion in rank are the Legates, who serve as the field marshals of the Legion's armies, on campaign and in battle. Lastly, the Legion has a few special ranks. The Vexillarius, soldiers chosen to serve as standard-bearers, carrying the Legion's military banner on campaign. The Speculatores, scouts who often handle cartography and battlefield reconnaissance. The Frumentarii, the Legion's spies, saboteurs, and assassins, who serve as Caesar's eyes and ears while operating deep in enemy territory. And lastly, there are the Praetorians, the most elite soldiers and officers in the Legion's army. Proficient in unarmed combat, these soldiers are hand-picked to serve on Caesar's personal security detail, the Praetorian Guard. Prospective Praetorians must challenge a current member of the Guard whom they believe to be weak, and the 2 men will then fight to the death in hand-to-hand combat for the position. Besides Caesar and Joshua Graham, perhaps no other man in the Legion is as feared as Legate Lanius. Little is known about the origin of Lanius, and the stories about him often conflict with one another. Caesar's account is the one most accepted by his troops. The man who would become Lanius was originally a member of an Arizona tribe known as the Hydebarks, and was a fierce warrior whose battle prowess, combined with his towering brute physique, allowed him to wipe out entire Legion patrols single-handed. All the while, his tribe's leaders delayed on their decision whether to be annexed by the Legion. When legionnaires finally surrounded the Hyde Park's main village, their chief decided to submit and surrender the tribe to Caesar rather than risk annihilation. Enraged at what he perceived as a betrayal by his leaders, Lanius attacked his fellow tribesmen, and after killing 15 warriors, he was finally subdued. When Caesar learned of Lanius's abilities as a warrior and a killer, he had him rescued and saw that his wounds were tended to. Lanius had been badly maimed and scarred, his mauled face mostly torn off from the bloody melee. When he finally regained consciousness, Caesar met with Lanius. He offered him a deal. If Lanius agreed to fight for him, and him alone, Caesar would provide him with a new helmet, forged of iron modelled after Mars, the god of war, to replace his disfigured face. Lanius accepted on the condition that he be permitted to slaughter all the surviving males of his tribe. Caesar agreed to his condition, provided that Lanius killed only the adult males, allowing the enslaved boys to be raised and indoctrinated into the army. From that day forward, Lanius would don the handcrafted iron armor forged for him by Caesar, becoming a legate in his army. Although there are plenty of other inconsistent accounts of Legate Lanius's origins, the fact remains that over the years, Lanius would rise to become one of the most feared men in Caesar's legion. His exploits during campaigns east of the Colorado River were well known across the legion. Under Lanius's orders, entire populations were either enslaved or put to the sword during his brutal conquest of tribes in southwestern Colorado. In Denver, Lanius broke the resolve of the Hangdogs tribe when he threw their revered hounds onto burning pyres so that they might burn in the afterlife. Stories would continue to spread back west of Lanius's campaigns in Colorado, where he would stretch his army's supply limits to their very breaking point. It was during these supply chain issues that Lanius learned the value of logistics in a military campaign, a lesson he would adhere to for the rest of his life. By the 2270s, stories of Legate Lanius's exploits in Colorado had made their way as far west as New California, where he would become known by his infamous moniker, the Monster of the East. By the year 2277, Caesar's legion had grown into a sizable empire in the American Southwest, through its brutal conquest, enslavement, and assimilation of 86 tribes, all reformed into the legion's homogeneous society under the totalitarian dictatorship of Caesar. With the legion's successes in Colorado and Utah, Caesar would now begin to shift his gaze westwards, beyond the Colorado River to the Mojave wasteland and beyond. His ultimate goal now, in order to complete the synthesis of his empire, was nothing short of the total conquest of the new California Republic. Viewing the Colorado as his Rubicon to inaugurate the start of a glorious campaign to conquer the NCR, in the spring of 2277, Caesar would send his armies west into the Mojave, where the Legion would fight its first great battle against the new California Republic Army at Hoover Dam. If you don't want to miss our coverage of the climatic clash between the Legion and the NCR, then make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.